This is white bread, my tutorial version. Folks, today we're going to be talking about white bread. White bread. This recipe is your perfect base recipe to make white bread. And the recipe that I'm going to give forth is enough to make 2 loaves. And I'm doing that on purpose because, number one, I wanted to teach making white bread. But I also wanted to teach how to make cinnamon rolls. Believe it or not, cinnamon rolls are made with the same white bread recipe. Hey, very fun. Now the neat thing about this recipe is it can be used in a whole lot of different ways. If you wanted to make breadsticks, this will make good breadsticks. If you want to, you can season those all kinds of different ways. If you wanted to make desserts, like cinnamon rolls, this is a perfect recipe for it. And this is exactly what professional bakers do. This is what professional chefs do. Pastry chefs, folks like that, they don't have different recipes for each item. They'll have a single base recipe that they turn into multiple different kinds of items. It speeds things up, makes life a lot easier in commercial kitchens, and you get more consistency and more quality. So it's a matter of finding a really good quality recipe. This is one of those recipes. This is a recipe, believe it or not, and I've got my recipe book here. You get to see it with stains and all. This comes from when I was young, okay? I think this was written out when I was in my early 20s, because I was still writing that style of cursive before I changed to my new style of cursive. So I've changed my writing style since then. Anyway, a recipe I've been using a long time, one that has proven itself to work. You could braid this recipe, you can make a coffee cake with this recipe, cinnamon rolls, white bread, all kinds of stuff. You can make a cinnamon loaf with this, all right? Raisin cinnamon bread, that kind of stuff. It's a perfect recipe for all of this. So let's get in the kitchen. Let me show you how to make this wonderful white bread. And we're gonna get busy cooking up a delicious loaf. It's perfect for the best sandwiches in the world. Come on. Now folks, today, as I mentioned, we're making white bread. And this is enough to make 2 loaves, okay? So I have a lot of ingredients out here. But you need to know what I'm using is flour, and it doesn't have to be a special flour. This is simple all-purpose flour. I've got milk, a little water added to that, some salt, yeast, sugar, and melted butter. And with these simple ingredients, we get a fantastic bread. Now let's get busy mixing this up. We are going to get started making the dough, but something I want to mention before we get into all of this. Yeast and salt. Okay, these are 2 things that don't go together too well. Salt will kill yeast. It will also slow down the growth of yeast. And you might be thinking, well, gosh, shouldn't I leave it out of my bread? I want it to rise. Well, yeah, but the salt gives it flavor, and it controls the speed at which the bread rises. So there is a relationship here, and the amount you use of each does matter. All right, I want to slow down that rise a little bit, but also I want to give a nice flavor, and that salt will add that. I don't want to mix the salt in with the first ingredients, though, because then the salt content is too high relative to the amount of other ingredients. So what I'll do here is I'm going to take the salt and I'm going to put it, let me get a shake here, put it right down over my flour. Looky there. And I want to stir that in just gently. It doesn't take much, just so there's no large amounts in one spot. Now all of the other ingredients I want to put down here in this bowl. We're going to mix them together. Let's take a close look at that. I'm going to start with my milk and water combination. This has been brought up in temperature a little bit. I put it in the microwave until it was just barely warm to the touch. About the same that you would do for a baby's milk bottle, okay? So the next thing I'm going to put in here is going to be that sugar. Then the yeast. You see, what we have here is we're waking up the yeast. Now, here's a little lesson for you. A long time ago, before yeast was really, perfected, they used to have a little bit harder time knowing if the yeast was going to be alive or not. And so bakers would do what they called proofing the yeast. And that is where they would simply add in amount of yeast to the sugar and the milk, and they would give it some time. And if it turns foamy, you know that yeast is good. But if it didn't turn foamy, then you would throw that out, knowing not to waste all of your other ingredients making bread because the yeast was bad, okay? So that's how they would tell if the yeast is good or not, and that's hence the term proofing the yeast. You've proved that it works or not, okay? Mixed in good and put in the butter. Now let's go ahead and start putting in some of the flour. Something I want to mention on this flour, when I measured it earlier, I measured it into a sifter and I sifted that flour out so that I would be certain there would be no lumps in the flour, and it also lightens it and gives a better quality texture to anything you bake. Sifting is a good thing. Doesn't hurt to spend a little extra time to do that. I want to start with part of the flour, and I'm going to put this on low speed. So as you can see, our dough is getting kneaded down beautifully. Just keep giving it some time, and we're going to do some time lapses here until this is fully kneaded out. But on the whole, I'm going to be giving it probably about 5 to 10 minutes. And my dough should be a little bit on the sticky side. You don't want it perfectly dry and firm, okay? Okay, it has come together as a ball. I'm going to increase the speed a little bit and let it do what it does. Now folks, when you're rising dough, don't ever use metal. Always rise in plastic, ceramic, or glass. And that is because metals will react with yeast. So the part of the dough that's in contact with the metal will not rise properly, okay? Do it this way and get a good rise. Now watch what I do here. I put a little bit of olive oil in here. It can be any oil, it doesn't have to be olive oil. But I'm just going to make sure the whole bowl is coated, okay? Because this is going to rise up high. It's going to consume the whole bowl space. All right, there we go. So that's ready. Something I want to mention, when you're rising, you don't want the top to be exposed. Now you can cover it with plastic wrap, or you can use something like another bowl. Just simply invert it. Boom, you've got a perfect setup for rising. You just need a warm place to place that, and with that, you'll get good rising, okay? So there's my rising kit, and I'm ready to go. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on here. Like I said, it's going to be somewhat sticky. See there, it stuck to me a little bit. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to pull it free, put it in the bottom of the bowl, drop my hook back down in there, and I want to let it go again. Every once in a while it'll pull up on the ball or on that hook, and it'll ball up on you. And if it does that, just push it down and give it another spin, and you're going to have some really good dough. Now what this does while we knead it, that's helping the development of gluten, and it produces a better quality bread. Okay, as you see, I got a spatula for myself, and that's because, as I mentioned before, this stuff, it's a little bit sticky, as you can see, and it just makes handling it a little easier. Be patient with it, that's all you got to do. See there, it's coming. Get down there, there you go. Just sticky enough to be a little bit difficult to manage, but not impossible. Okay, at this point, cover it, put it in a warm place, and let it rise. There we go. Well folks, as you can see, when it comes to making white bread, there's not a lot to do. The next steps are pretty straightforward and easy. We're going to have a pan to cook it up in. I'm going to be greasing that out. You can use butter, you can grease and flour it if you want. We'll go into that in a minute. And, well, it's just as simple as let it rise, punch it down, roll it out, and turn it into what you want it to be. And in this case, because we're going to be making bread, what a lot of bakers will do is after they roll it, they then roll it into a log and put it into that the loaf pan and let it rise a second time. You don't have to roll it out and then turn it into a log, but it is a common way of doing it. Now what I'll be doing is just dividing it out. We're going to put part of it in our loaf pan, and another part is going to be used for yet another recipe for another video. So folks, it's white bread time, and it's time to kick back and relax because the yeast is doing its job. Patience. There it is. This thing has risen up. Look at the air pockets in that. They're absolutely stunning, and it has, well, almost tripled in bulk. Now what I need to do is punch this down, divide it into 2 parts, and then I can fill my loaf pans. You're going to want to take your loaf pans and go ahead and butter those before you put your bread down in there. Now folks, I need to get this loaf pan set up so that I don't have to worry about sticking. And I'm just going to use a stick of butter, put it down in there, and I'm going to rub it all the way around. If it looks like I'm doing a terrible job, well, you're right, I am. That part of it doesn't matter, you're just trying to get some in there. Now we take our hand, and we spread that evenly. You want to spread evenly all over the sides, and make sure you get the edge between the bottom and the sides. The corners need to be done real well, because if they stick, then you got a real problem. All right, make sure that bottom is done. That pan is ready to go. I just got to get my flour in there, and we're cooking with gas. Now I've got a little flour here. Let's just dust the inside of this pan with some. It doesn't take a lot. So you see how it spreads around. I want to run it on the sides. And if you make a little mess, don't worry about it. There we go. Now, what I don't use, I'm simply going to knock out of this pan. Now I have a perfectly greased and floured pan. A couple of little spots that are missing, but you know what? This should work fine for what we're doing. Nothing like getting to punch down the dough. There you go. Hey, it's just tradition, okay? Go ahead and enjoy doing that, and then what we want to do is take our dough. I'm going to place it here on this board, flour it up here, and I'm going to divide it out. And that's what these things are for. This is actually a pastry knife is what that is, and it is kind of dull on the end, but it's designed to work with dough. All right, we'll get that turned out. Right onto that floured surface. And remember, this is a sticky dough, so you're going to fight with it a little bit, but it's not a bad thing. So I want to sprinkle some more flour over the top of this, and this should just help make it a little more manageable, okay? All I need to do, just kind of work it lightly. There we go. Now I'm trying to form kind of a sort of an oblong shape so that I can judge about what half would be, and it doesn't have to be perfect. All right, so half and half. Now we're going to take this, we're going to turn it into a wonderful loaf. So what some people will do here when they're making white bread, they'll take this and they roll it out. And they'll keep it about the same width as the pan, but they'll roll it out longwise and then roll it up and drop that down into the pan and then let it rise. All right, sometimes I've done that. Other times I do what I'm going to do today, which is where I just kind of shape it out a little bit and then drop it in my pan. All right. There we go. Nothing more to it than that. Let's give it time to rise, and once it gets nice and puffed up, well, we're ready to cook it up. It's in the pan. It has a little plastic wrap over the top of it, and the rise is coming along. Okay, so this just needs time. It's going to take it easily 45 minutes or more, and I'm using a fast yeast. Your yeast may take longer. Again, it also depends on the altitude and the hydration level of the dough. There's a lot of factors. Just be patient, and when it rises up, we're going to preheat the oven and get it cooked up. Now folks, this cooks at 375 to 400, take your pick, and you're going to be in there for about 30 minutes on that. So it just depends, again, altitude and some other factors as to how long, but average around 30 minutes in the oven. Alrighty, look at that. It has risen up beautifully. It's just about ready to go in the oven. I have the oven preheating, and when I put this in there, I need to do so gently. It will cook up and be beautiful. Now, temperature-wise, what temperature do I cook this at? I'm going to be cooking this at 375 degrees. Now, ladies and gentlemen, understand when I normally cook bread, I cook it at about 400 degrees. It takes about a half an hour. I'm cooking this at a different temperature because I'm cooking something else with it that I normally cook at 350 degrees. So I'm kind of splitting the difference between those two recipes. So today, and sometimes you got to be flexible. So today I'm cooking it at 375. It'll come out fine. It'll just be in there for 5 minutes more. That's all. It's time for us to get this into the oven and do some baking. Oh, I like days like this. There we go. Now it's just a matter of time. Now today, as you've seen, we've made a lot of dough, and I'm making more than one recipe here. I'm making some bread, but also I'm doing another video, which is going to be some cinnamon buns. And on the recipe quantity here for 2 loaves, that is 5 cups of all-purpose flour. If you want to use a bread flour for this, you can, but all-purpose will work fine. I started with 1.5 cups of milk and added 1/2 cup of water to it, giving me 2 cups total liquid volume. On the salt, that's 2 teaspoons of salt. 4.5 teaspoons of yeast. The yeast is that's equivalent to 2 packages of dry yeast. Now on the sugar, I have 3 tablespoons of sugar there, and over here 3 tablespoons of butter that's melted out. And that is your recipe for 2 loaves. And it's as simple as this. If you want 1 loaf, cut all of these ingredient quantities in half, and you're up and cooking. There it is, folks. There's our bread. It's out. It's beautiful. Yep, it's got a good sound to it. Now, give it some time to cool, and look behind it. Look at the wonderful extra goodies that you can make with a white bread recipe. It's all about your creativity. Folks, once the bread has cooled a little bit to the touch, you want to take a clean towel, gently turn that bread out, and there he is. You have it. Beautiful white bread right there. Ladies and gentlemen, the white bread is still a bit warm, okay, but it has cooled enough to handle easily, and it should hold its shape well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this open, not in the middle, but just toward one of the ends. And that way, you can see what we call the crumb. Now the crumb is the texture on the inside of the bread. Is it even, coarse, whatever? Generally, the crumb on white bread is very even and smooth across. And what do you see here? Even. It's smooth all the way across. This is a good white bread, and you should enjoy every bit. Oh, yeah. Oh. Oh, yeah. You know what I like about this white bread? I put butter in it. It really sets it off. And as far as a good base recipe, it's worth your time, okay? Keep this one, use it. Man, that's good. And enjoy. Folks, please, look at my description box down below. You're gonna see some links there. I've got some links for my other channel here on YouTube at Chef Trotters Tips. Mostly a sounding board for me, but I put a lot of interesting things on there. So take a look at that. Also, my website, my Facebook, they're there for you to check out. So look in the description box, you're gonna see those links. It's S.A.Trotter.com. I'll be putting up the recipes and aprons and other things for Texas cooking today on there in the next few months. Please keep in touch, keep watch on that. And folks, thank you very much for watching this. Please enjoy your white bread. I'm going to enjoy mine. And please have a good day. Bye-bye. Yeah.